Opposites attract in a broken world. It's an oxymoronic, paradoxical thing. When you understand magnetics, you get the gist of what's going on. You get it. Because you realize, as I mentioned before, if we have a sphere, we drop it, it cracks in half, it's not going to snap back together. What's going to happen is the opposites are going to attract. Okay, listen to what I'm saying. I wish I had one to display. I was trying to find something to do it with. If the spheroid is perfect, and in a physical reality, you drop it on the floor and it cracks, the opposites are going to attract. So technically, it's opposites attracting is not how things are supposed to be. It's just that way in a broken reality. And that's why I believe that this whole thing of cutting man from woman and creating a man and a woman when they're really supposed to be always aware that they are in the same body, and the whole act of creating the world and you know, the pulling Eve from Adam and all this kind of stuff is all hints just to that this world is in itself like a broken magnet because the organism was split. And now in a world where opposites attract, because this is like a perfect setup then, because in certain ways, you know, I'm again not demonizing the reality, but in a world where opposites attract, this consistently sets you up to have experiences with things that are not like you. And while that may be constructive for a while, it will get destructive. And this is what we have to like be clear enough as adepts to know that. But let's imagine that, I mean, in every single a polarity that you can think of, like a healer and a killer get together.
The following clip is exclusive content from the university. Access over 300 videos and 26 courses with advanced metaphysics on demand. Jump in live chats with Savan and the rest of the tribe. New materials are available monthly along with guides and regimens. Subscribe today and save $25 off your first month membership. Links are in the descriptions. Subscribe to Secret Energy TV or this channel for future show notifications. Wholeness.
So we're talking about a new way of training the consciousness. Here it goes. This was the core. This is the seed to today and what is coming forth. A new way of training the consciousness because of a brand new revelation. Okay, so I want you to like a new way of training the consciousness because of a brand new revelation, something that you figured out that made total sense. And then because of that, you chose to be much more selective, like a surgeon, about how you performed the healing. Because anytime somebody needs to get healed, like with the surgeon thing, if you slice the wrong ventricle, it's a wrap. So there is a thin line between healing and killing something. And sometimes that thin line is hard to find. It blurs because sometimes you just want to kill that thing. And yeah, most of the time it's like, I'm going to kill this. And that's the whole approach. I don't ever want to see him again. They're dead. They're done. Like I said, you're dead to me. And we need to realize, based on the last massive dossier that we have, that anything that you kill, you're killing it inside of yourself. It's a real thing. When you decide that you don't like it, you don't like them, whoever them is, you're going to try to find that internally and you're going to try to kill it, because that's what it means to not care. You have to go and isolate through your feelings. Your body knows how to do it internally in your mind. It will go and find it. So let me give you an example. Let me give you a rudimentary example. Let me get some water here in a moment before I start foaming at the mouth. So a rudimentary example here. So people that have racial beef, because it's still going on. Whoever it is, who's going to be here today. Let's get the Chinese. We don't have any Chinese people in here today, so they wouldn't. I see a couple half Chinese people. Okay, we'll go with Korean. No, I'm joking. But I'm just saying that, let's say you have beef with Koreans. and it's not coming with your kimchi, meaning that it's like you have this thing that somebody embedded in you that all Koreans, they're no good. And even every time you see a Korean, you be like, sneaky Korean. Just some weird program running. Now, fill Korean in with anything you may be dealing with. Now, technically, we already know that any race of people in the planet, no matter what you think, correspond to a specific part of the planet or the universe or the cosmos. So they represent that area. Now we know how the body is designed is every single area in the body. Like this area over here on the south side is about hearing. All these organs, everybody do something different, right? Especially with the organs, because it's like only one. So we get two of everything else. I was like, shit. Well, we do get two kidneys. So, it's very selective. Like the pancreas, we didn't get two pancreas. I don't know. Nitty may tell me different. She may say, shit, well, yeah, you do have two pancreas. But anyway, I'm not in the anatomy deep, but I know some things you have two of, some things you have one of, right? Which is weird anyway. It's like, why did I get two pancreases? I could have used two of those. But what I'm getting at here is that if you don't like something or someone, and that corresponds directly to a certain part, you're now going to kill that. So if there's let's say if there's a race of people who represent the heart, if you don't like those people, you have to kill your heart. And that's what goes on subconsciously. If you have a race of people that really correspond to the brain and you don't like them, you will start being dumb. You won't not have access to like the brain stuff, because that's what it means to actually not like or kill something. So the reason why I said that's the seed of this is because this defies much of how we're trained to deal with most situations that we go through in life. And that's why I said this is a new way of training the consciousness, because from everything that we understand now of what makes us sick, what hurts us, what kills us, all these kind of things, what doesn't allow us to connect, what disconnects us, what is the misperception, the illusion, all of these different topics that we cover all center into this very thing. That one needs to know the difference between when they're killing versus when they're healing, and that they should always be healers of life, because in that, what you're doing is you're going to make sure that that part of whatever it is that you're dealing with that exists within you, which is why it's showing up anyway in your reality, if you may. Here comes the time again to really heal that. And if it does not happen at every interval where you're being given the opportunity to allow it to happen, then we can only assume that this was on the outlook that you are continuously choosing to weave a pattern of death for yourself. And so true rehabilitation does come in when you're looking at those things that you have destroyed in your life. And then you start deciding to go and pick up the rubble and start building out the foundation again, and start realizing why that's useful in this existence, where that goes, what is its place. And so also remember that life is not always about processing the bad things that happens. That's also when you're getting extremely damaged, like it's like being sick. You only can deal with trying to get better. And with a perpetual sickness happening, you're just always going to be in this position where you're trying to get better. And that's what I'm seeing is like, we should keep going and lose the other narrative now that we have our own. It's not necessary for me to believe, and that would be a belief, all of these finely woven stories that still don't benefit me about this reality and what kind of aliens and where they came from and their story, anything about anything about something else that doesn't have to do with me in a beneficial way. And making these changes and making these optimizations will actually put you into a different state because of these following reasons. One of the things that I wanted to, so let me explain directly. This first reason is what I'm calling negative character construction over time. We can actually just call this distorted character construction over time, because we already have demarked that negativity is not the bad one. It's the other pole. And we always have to make sure that we understand that negativity, it doesn't mean bad. So when we're trying to talk about the bad one or the one we don't like, we like to say that the distorted one, because that's literally what it looks like. The geometry is not perfect. It's a distorted geometry. So we're saying when distorted things, distorted character construction. So distorted character construction is that when things do happen crazy, like, man, if you burn something on the stove, you ever been cooking something and then, everything is perfect. You go use the restroom, then you checking your phone, then you start smelling it burning, and then you go in there and you're like, oh my goodness. Oh, Cynthia, you're so stupid. Look. You see what I mean? But this is like 20, 30x an hour for some people. And we know that this is because this character, specifically this distorted character, is constructed over time. It has a certain pattern. And it's very easy to jump into this pattern. It's because you know how I know how easy it's okay, so basically when it gets really easy to jump into that, it becomes even harder not to. It took me 8 years to get rid of this thing. 8 years to finally win the battle of distorted character, because it had so much energy and it had so much history. And so thus it had basically made me think that I was it. And again, only until I started noticing the play within the language and getting on the side of yourself and what's actually created, and then how it is in your own consciousness at times, and it starts to act like it's you. So at the end of the day, then you start really, when you're coming into yourself again, you're able to really easily see the difference between you versus this character that tries to pretend to be you, that will be in many ways sometimes a negative, or a distorted character construct. And then what I call this conversation with this aspect of self is the distorted character genuflect, right? Because genuflection, only religion you really hear about genuflection is Islam. And genuflection is like when you are really meditating on God, basically. Like you're going to get this conversation going on. So this is a real conversation going on in the consciousness. And I feel like that the only conversation many of us be having going on sometimes is a conversation with a distorted character, and we're constantly talking to that character, and we're talking in English. If we didn't notice, sometimes it doesn't go and being noticed that this thing is talking back to you in English. And you got to understand right from there that you created an eidolon and you taught it English, and now you got it talking to you. And you have a conversation going on with it in your brain. Now, I'm not saying that this is the worst thing. I'm just saying you need to understand the mechanics here, because other than that, you'll be like kind of leading yourself by your own tail. So using English, which is a language of power, mastery, wizardry, and all that stuff, that's why dreams and all that kind of stuff, it connects into very mystical stuff. It does. Black magic, the whole nine, all that kind of stuff is all about this construct of the mind, its consciousness, and the power of your mind and words and letters and spells. So at the end of the day, when we're having a conversation with something in our mind and it's saying, girl, should we go to the store? You got to really be on point with just what just happened. Who are you talking to? And then just the awareness that if you didn't have a language and you had to send all that to your mind with pictures, how that would like move like a whole part of your consciousness pretty much out of the way. It would just be like, okay, we're not using language anymore to communicate. What's your name again? Yeah, that's right, Anne. Is that in all caps? You know what I mean? So you just start realizing the created character. Now, again, like this is not that's your camel that you rode in on. It's just not completely you. It has a very strong use. It's like your car in this realm, in this dimension. But how it's equipped, that's what we're talking about. What the condition that is in. And then when you get in that car, you know how some folks, they can really drive cars. They be slide the car all the way around the corner and drop the gear, speed shift, the whole nine. So there's different ways of driving the car. Some folks be like, you know what I mean? So it's how are you riding the vehicle? Like, you know, how are we looking these days? And I'm just saying, with the current narrative, it's not really designed, in the reality, it's not designed to allow us to ride nice and actually get more and more closer to the progressive connection and the feeling of the energy that is coming from. Now watch this, because this is, so since we had a seed, this would be the tree of this. I'll put this up on the screen. So you know how, like, in the reality, because they're doing everything always backwards, right? The words are backwards. And so in the reality, there's this thing where the reason why we're working hard, because I had to kind of like isolate this really. Like, I had one of those moments like 2 or 3 days ago. I was like, man, I just got to sit down with myself and just isolate this. What are we doing again? And it's like, well, the reason why we're working is because we mine. Like, when I go to a job every day, I'm mining that job. Basically, I'm basically taking my time and I'm prospecting where I'm at, and then they're going to pay me based on my mining of that job. That's why your job really requires you to think. Versus in a type 4 civilization, which we'll get to here in a minute and what that means. Instead of mining anything, what you're looking to do is primarily harness the power of the energy that is already being delivered to you, mainly the stars. And what this is about is that, well, when we go to mine like oil, gold, all these things, you got to spend all this time and energy and all this to bring this stuff out of the earth and then to ultimately create energy from it. Whether that's money, electronics, wires, whatever it is, it's all just being used to convert into a kind of energy or a kind of current. But the reason where the world has gone kind of in a silly direction is because they're basically using an extremely non-efficient system, because you already got tons of power being beamed to us all the time. Okay? And we're not even paying attention to it. We're not even using it. It's kind of like before solar panels. So then what they do, and I'll explain this here in a minute with the chart that I had up, what they would do is then they would classify, I'll put it back up now because it is needed. They would classify, or there was a classification of civilizations based on their ability to become aware of certain truths about the energy in realities. And that would actually determine what stage of intelligence the society would actually reach. And every time it reached a different stage, that would change its type. So humanity is at this stage, I believe, more of a type 1 civilization, with type 4 being, and I'm going to read this. The scale is hypothetical and regards energy consumption on a cosmic scale. Various extensions of the scale have been proposed, or have since been proposed, including a wide range of power levels. Let me just go down here to the meat of this. A type 1 civilization is able to access all the energy available on its planet and store it for consumption. Okay, so this is actually, I said it in reverse. The world is like a type 4 civilization right now. At the stage of type 1, which we're looking at this all in a metaphysical way, at the stage of a type 1 civilization, you would be able to basically genuflect or connect with all of the energies of the stars. And we need to understand that when we say energy, what we're talking about is a communication, a vibration, a pattern that contains information. And let me clean that up for you. If you were contacting a star that is in another galaxy, that is on another wavelength or vibration, and it had gone through a different experience, and you were able then to tune into its station is a vibration. So as you're on that station, its vibration is not only information, its information and vibration is also an energy. And when you're capable of receiving those energies, you reach type 1. Now, type 1 is high-end stuff. This is like the worlds that everybody be dreaming that we reach. They call it a super civilization. They say there's super civilizations out there, but the most important part is to create one within. And in a super civilization, it actually requires that you take a moment and realize, well, still, wait a minute. You know that hot ass sun that you be getting out in sometime every day? That's a power source. And there's some people who know how to catch that right now, that energy, and turn it right into current. However, we have many people who they're not aware of such things because, see, in a type 4 civilization, maybe this world is more of a type 3 civilization because there's a certain point where it's already kind of deemed that the civilization can't even, it can't interface. It doesn't know how to interface. And I don't want to say anything bad about the animals. I'm just trying to give an example here. But imagine that if it took that we built certain technologies to be able to learn how to communicate with these stars, let's say, for instance, but we never reached a stage where we had hands yet to build that technology, we would be in a type 3 civilization anyway for a certain period of time until we got hands to then build the technology to get us to a type 1, till we could get the consciousness, type 2, till we can get the consciousness to get us into a type 1. So it is really, I don't even want to use the term evolutionary, but it is a progressive process of reaching type 2, type 1 life form. And the fundamentals of it, as it, again, is already been discussed within sciences. Also, the gentleman who this is named after, who was, I believe, a Russian, what was his position? He was a Russian astronomer, Kardashev, right? What he was also like constantly engaged in, and, you know, there's just so much knowledge and wisdom in the world, you can't necessarily have it all, nor do you possibly need it all. You only need what you need in this moment. But this would be a probably interesting, very interesting deep dive on this particular gentleman, because his whole thing is that he was like, basically like, look, there's other levels of communication coming in right now from other star systems. That's why he was like, he was in this mission to design something that was going to detect super civilizations that were already in existence, because in his awareness, he felt like there were already places that had achieved this, just from the sheer fact that once we start looking up to the stars, remember he was an astronomer, that we would find out something. And maybe also he already found out something. It's just in that process of observation. Like, I had a moment of realizing that the moon is everything that's always happened. And it does actually impact the consciousness rather negatively. Because I was on some DMT and I was looking through a telescope at the moon for about 30 minutes on a DMT journey. And you were never able to make out what you were actually seeing. But then when I went to bed, I went into this, it wasn't pleasant. And that's what I realized. Okay, now I understand more what the moon is. So do you see how, like, we could have a theoretical aspect and idea of when I say the moon, oh, well, it's this amount of miles away. We can't see the other side of it. So there's all this knowledge about it, but none of that is actually wisdom, because wisdom comes with experience. It would take somebody that went to the moon already to tell you This is what the moon is. Not somebody who can just write about the moon, but never. It's kind of like a person who's never had a baby. You know what I mean? And then but they're telling you, what to do and how to have it and these kind of things. It's just two different things, right? It's like a man trying to tell a woman, this is how you go through this pregnancy. You see what I mean? It's like, well, how do you know? You're not even in a woman's body. So there's always going to be somewhat of a disconnect there, right? So it's just that awareness again that, this is how we would progress in our consciousness. And so that's why this is more encouragement to lose the current narrative, because it doesn't support any of this. It doesn't support your movement to a type 1 internal superorganism. So the next thing is also opposites attract in a broken world. It's an oxymoronic, paradoxical thing. When you understand magnetics, you get the gist of what's going on. You get it. Because you realize, as I mentioned before, if we have a sphere, we drop it, it cracks in half, it's not going to snap back together. What's going to happen is the opposites are going to attract. Okay, listen to what I'm saying. I wish I had one to display. I was trying to find something to do it with. If the spheroid is perfect, and in a physical reality, you drop it on the floor and it cracks, the opposites are going to attract. So technically, it's opposites attracting is not how things are supposed to be. It's just that way in a broken reality. And that's why I believe that this whole thing of cutting man from woman and creating a man and a woman when they're really supposed to be always aware that they are in the same body, and the whole act of creating the world and the pulling Eve from Adam and all this kind of stuff is all hints just to that this world is in itself like a broken magnet because the organism was split. And now in a world where opposites attract, because this is like a perfect setup then, because in certain ways, again, not demonizing the reality, but in a world where opposites attract, this consistently sets you up to have experiences with things that are not like you. And while that may be constructive for a while, it will get destructive. And this is what we have to be clear enough as adepts to know that. But let's imagine that, in every single a polarity that you can think of, like a healer and a killer get together. Okay? And now the conscious community, they romanticize stuff like this. Because they be like, and the killer will become like a lover of healing. Right? And then they paint this movie like The Notebook, where the CIA killer operative meets this gorgeous Reiki master. And through a series of events with some people robbing a store, he saves her. But he's got 200 murders under his belt. And one night he's having a bad nightmare and he calls her. You see what I mean? So we romanticize this kind of stuff. But the fact of the matter is consistently dealing with the opposite pole will cause damage to your vehicle. Now, the reason why it's promoted in the experience is because the experience runs on that. The matrix runs on combustions. It runs on conflict. It runs on the dualistic forces. It runs on that the male and the female are going to keep generating life externally, because then the external reality can't run. Versus in the internal aspects of things, it's just basically there's the externalism reality doesn't even play a real component. It's like an infinite dream, because external realities, they have death as a component. Internally, in a perpetual scenario, death is impossible. So in this way, we can potentially celebrate still the external reality as being one of the most impossible things that ever happened. And, just see its use there. But still, as a master, realize that the opposites attracting inside of the realities are directly related to the magnetics being already busted. And that now you have to perform a special kind of work of putting that magnet actually back together. And in that way, it would be that the each pole attracted to itself, because that's what a sphere is. A sphere is actually the poles are actually in a perfect alignment. They're in balance. They're attracted to themselves.